This week on Voices of Valor, I sat down with a former Air Force crew chief who's now using his time training dogs to be service animals or companions to veterans. Here's Bill O'Brien's story. And what was your position when you were in the military?
So I was a crew chief on KC-135s, and this was back in the late 70s, where I joined the service right out of high school. Kind of a snot-nosed kid that needed to get set straight, so to speak. I certainly didn't have the patience to go to college at that time. I figured, you see the world, you go get an education while you're in the military, and that was the plan, I suppose. And that's what I did. So
exactly, you got in. How long exactly were you in the military?
I was in for 4 years.
4 years.
From 76 to 80. 1980, before Ronald Reagan became president, everybody was at that time struggling with how to stay in the military. You couldn't really afford to stay in. You really didn't make a lot of money at that time. And things were expensive. The cheapest part of staying in the military, and the thing that everybody promoted, was you could have children for $25 or $50 or whatever it was, but that you had to feed them and clothe them afterwards. So you really couldn't afford to stay in. When President Reagan took control, salaries changed, importance changed, and all of those things changed. And if he had become president when I was still in, who knows? Things might have changed. I might have stayed in. So I had a good time when I was in the military. I learned an awful lot, and I think the military actually set the foundation for the rest of my career. So
you said that you were a snot-nosed kid, and you were not ready to join the military at that time. Or you weren't ready to join college at the time?
I wasn't ready to go to college, yeah.
Okay, you weren't ready to go to college, so you decided to join the military. Well, talk to me about the process of joining the military and going to boot camp.
So I signed up I took my first test when I was 16. I took my second test when I was 17. And back then, you needed a parent's signature to join the military if you were under 18. So my dad, the agreement was my father would sign off on me going in, and I went in when I was 17 still, except he did not want me joining the Marines. My dad was a Marine. He wanted me to join a branch that he thought I would learn something that I could use when I got out. So my dad was a Marine. He was at one point a drill instructor, and he was an embassy guard, and he met my mom when he was in the Marines. But his thing was, and then he became a New York City policeman. He did not want me joining the Marines because his thought was you'd get out and you're going to become a cop, and that's not what he wanted to have happen. So I joined the Air Force. I took the test. I joined the Air Force, and they let me pick what I wanted to be. And I figured if you join the Air Force, you should do something with planes. So I went into aircraft maintenance, and I ended up becoming a crew chief on a tanker, which is a flying gas station. But it's a Boeing 707, and so we used to transport people around the country. We'd fly them overseas, we'd fly them wherever they needed to be, and in the meantime, we also refueled planes on the way doing it. So.
Okay, and a crew chief, tell me exactly what they do.
So back in the 70s, a crew chief, you were responsible from the tip of that plane to the tail of that plane. Your job was keep that plane up and running. When the plane landed, you were responsible for meeting it. When the plane was ready to take off or it had a mission that was coming up, you're responsible for going in, pre-flighting it, finding things that are incorrect with it or wrong with it, and then fixing them. And that's what a crew chief does. They really were responsible for keeping that thing flying. Your name was on the side of that plane, so you were obligated to keep it going. So
you said if you join the Air Force, you might as well do something with aircrafts. So did you already have a love for aircrafts, or did it develop when you started working with them?
Yeah, it developed when I started learning about them. When you go to boot camp, they start to put in bricks, if you will, that teach you about accountability and responsibility, taking ownership for things. And then when you move on to tech school, you take some of that and now you combine it with the knowledge in a particular area. And it was aircrafts. And the folks that I was stationed with, some of them from boot camp up to tech school up in Illinois, they were guys that had been aircraft mechanics back in Brooklyn. They went to a technical school. They went to an aviation school back in Brooklyn. And then so I learned all about aircraft from them as we were going through boot camp and then tech school. And they stayed in the same field. So, and some of us actually, I mean, I'm still friends with some of those guys, wow, from the 70s, right? So what's that, 50 years?
Yeah.
So 50 years later, and we're still friends. We still talk. But they teach you. I learned my love for planes then when I was in tech school, and then I really developed it when I got to my permanent duty station. So
talk about some of the best times you had working as a crew chief.
You know, crew chiefs, it's an up and down job, right? You let pilots borrow your plane for a couple of hours, and then they come back and they tell you all the things they didn't like about it. But you make some of the best friends I think you ever will. I've met crews that we used to fly to Alaska or to Spain or to England, and it was just fun being with them. I mean, it was just, you know, my job was keep it going and keep the plane flying, and their job was to just drive it somewhere. So I had a great time. I met some people. We had some things that have occurred that I'll never forget. I mean, other crew chiefs, you know, we had some crazy folks that I was stationed with that they did some strange things that, you know, they leave indelible imprints in your mind. We had a kid once that he ordered a valve, a little sensor for a fuel tank. And the sensor, you got to the sensor from inside the plane. And it was a center tank, which sits in the middle of the plane. And he thought that he was going to just change this tube by himself. I never really thought about the fuel tank still had fuel in it, and it was pressurized. So he popped that little tank off. He popped that little valve off, and that fuel started spurting inside that plane. And that plane, for whatever reason, tankers have this thing called a tail stand, which is always in the back of the plane. It's always propped up, and it inserts into the tail of the plane, and it keeps the tail always sitting up. So when you're refueling, and if you make a mistake, the worst you can do is, you know, damage that connection. But without that, there's always a chance that fuel, if one end of the plane becomes too heavy, the plane actually sits on its butt. And he did not have a tail stand in when he was doing all of this work. And sure enough, this fuel started pouring out and pouring into this plane, and he didn't know what to do. So he ran downstairs to go look for help, and then the nose of the plane starts coming off the ground, and he's hanging onto this wheel well, just hanging onto these tires, screaming bloody murder. And then, you know, so we kind of went there and got the tail stand in.
So he came looking for you?
He came looking for anybody that he wanted God at that point. He wanted someone to reach down and hold that plane down because that plane was going up, and it, you know, so, but those are the types of things that, I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
So that's probably not one of your best times.
No, it was fun. I mean, it was horrible because we spent all weekend trying to clean that plane and pull everything out from the inside. But it was funny just to tell the story over and over again, to say, you know, this guy is sitting there hanging on this plane, and, you know, the story always gets embellished as you tell it.
Yes,
so it's
yes.
like, you know.
Oh, well, talk to me about some of the challenges that you face being in the military.
The biggest challenge, I suppose, was, you know, you're always away from your family at times, right? Back in the 70s, I had just gotten married, halfway through my enlistment. Probably 2 years into my enlistment. And, you know, at the time, people aren't making a lot of money. People are getting out of the military. Guys that had 12 years, they're out. We had a lot of folks from Vietnam that were just finishing up their tours, and they're getting out. So your hours became longer. You know, 12-hour days were pretty common. If you had any issues or problems, or there was a delay, you stayed with it. So, you know, 14-hour, 16-hour, 18-hour days became normal. Sometimes, you know, when you wanted to do something, you wanted to go to school, and I had signed up for some electrical engineering classes and stuff, And, the answer was the military's needs come first, right? So you are missing work, I'm missing classes, So those were some of the challenges that you faced. You didn't really have a lot of money. I mean, I have, believe it or not, W-2s from back then, and they're, $4,000, right? So you're making $4,000 a year. That's not a lot of money, right? So, and the government always got paid on the 15th and the last day of the month. So February's were fantastic. But any other 31-day months, you're sitting there counting your pennies at the end of the week saying, man, do I have enough for gas? So those were the tough times. Being away, when you went up on alert, you were gone for 7 days on, 7 days, 4 days off. So you'd be gone for stretches of time. If you went TDY, and that happened quite a bit, where you went on a temporary duty assignment, you could be gone for 45 days, 60 days, 90 days at the time. So you would say, I'm here in January, and then I'll see you in April. So some people get it, some people struggle with it. Fortunately, at the time, my wife at that time, she was okay with it, but there really wasn't much you could do about it. So those were the hard parts. But there's good and bad with every job, right? So
going back to you, what do you think the military taught you? How were you before you went in? How were you when you came out?
Yeah, so going in, I was probably a problem child when I was young. Some people would call it a problem child. It was just, I don't know. I was not a great student. There are so many things I've learned in the past since then that if you teach people how to be a student, that actually you could be a good one if you wanted to, right? If at the time they taught you how to study, how to take notes, how to organize, those types of things, life could have been so much easier. But I didn't have any of those skill sets. My sisters did. They were like, sliding through school like it was nothing, and I was just chunking through. So I really wasn't a big fan of school. I knew that I wanted to get out and see the world because at that time, being a snot-nosed kid, I knew it all. So now I needed to go out and just experience it all, right? So being a problem child, it made sense for me to go into the military. But then the military, that first week, first day in boot camp, you get off this bus and they have you stand on the little yellow feet on the ground. And then this little man comes out and he's Sergeant Perez and he says, pick him up. And then you pick your bags up and he says, put him down. And you put him down. He says, pick him up and put him down. And we did that for 20, 25 minutes, right? That's all we did. Pick him up, put him down. And this is 2 a.m, right? So we started, when I left for boot camp, for military, I was at Fort Hamilton at by 7 o'clock in the morning. And because even then I couldn't be late, so I was there at 6:30, waiting to get in at 7 o'clock. So, the day started then, and it was like 2 a.m. when we arrived at San Antonio, and this guy is like, pick him up, put him down, pick him up. So you learn right away that, there are people that have complete control over everything you do, right? And Sergeant Perez, he walked up and down the aisle and he looked at you in the eye and he said, you don't look Puerto Rican to me. I said, no, sir. And he's like, there's a chance you're not going to pass this boot camp. I'm going to set you back. And that was his thing, right? If you're not Puerto Rican, I'm setting you back. And there were no Puerto Ricans in our flight. So everybody sat there and said, he's setting us back, right? Already he's starting to set us back. But he wasn't really as bad as he makes it seem when you first got there. But that's their goal. Their goal is to tear everybody down, make everybody equal, and make you start listening and pay attention. So the military teaches you, it gives you, if you're a young kid, it gives you a good foundation for taking accountability, for learning to listen. Listen with your ears and not with your mouth.
So how long did it take you to get it together?
10 minutes tops, I think, was pretty much it. And we had a great time in boot camp. I mean, there were some things that, snake patrol and all this other stuff. And it's like, are you kidding me? We're from Long Island, right? We have little itty bitty gardener snakes. They're talking about huge rattlers, and they're saying 2 people got to go out on snake patrol, and they put the littlest guys out because they're closer to see the snake, and if a snake eats one of them, just keep marching by. And you're like, where am I? It's like some sort of prehistoric story, but it's all part of the program. It's all, Pete Hegseth, right, the Secretary of Defense now, he wants you to get back to those old days, right? I understand people go through boot camp now and it's not nearly as bad and they talk nicety and stuff. Back in the day, they didn't have those restrictions on you. They told you exactly what they thought of you, right? I mean, and every word in the book came out. So it was fun. I mean, I've been chewed out by some of the best. So, but when you get out of the military, when you've gone through some of those experiences, there's nothing anybody can do to you that can match some of those things. So
really,
yeah, I mean,
someone can fuss you out now, and you're good.
Yeah, I mean, I know how to deal with all of that stuff, and a lot of it I learned from the military. I got to tell you, I was as a crew chief, you were responsible for keeping your plane flying, and cowling is the front of an engine. Right, it's usually like the silver part. It's really shiny, and it's where all the air goes in between that big gap, that big opening. And we had some guys that had gotten some new cowling, and I mean, and it looked nice. It was highly polished. It was very impressive. So I thought I would order some new cowling for one of my engines. And either I gave them the wrong number or they wrote down the wrong number. And I'd prefer to think that they wrote down the wrong number. But in any event, it ended up ordering a whole engine. So back in those days, right, money was really tight. And so they didn't just order a $55,000 part, such as an engine. They call into the squadron commander. And they did, and they called in, and of course he canceled it and said, "What idiot ordered an engine?" And so then he chews out the guy under him, who chews out the person under him, who chews out, oh, it's me. So then they chewed me out, and then I had to go meet the guy that chewed him out, and then eventually the wing commander, squadron commander. And this major is standing there screaming and yelling at you, and all I'm seeing is this little tonsil in the back of his throat wiggling back and forth saying, can it get any worse than this? And I mean, and he threatened with, he was going to take my car, he was going to whatever, to pay for these parts that I was ordering. I mean, he thought of everything he could think of, right? And it was, you get through it and you go back to work and they're like, phew.
Well, the situation was rectified, right?
They didn't buy the engine, yes. And I never fixed my cowling, so it stayed the way it was. And I thought it was ratty looking, but it worked. And I never got a new engine, but it was kind of sad. It was kind of funny when you look back on it, though, because everybody knows about it, right? So you get out of that office, and by the time you get back to the flight line, they've already called ahead. Everybody already knows, So you find little miniature engine parts on your desk or and it's like, there you go. But that was it. It was fine. So, I mean, when you get chewed out by some of those folks, there's nothing you can do about that.
Okay, well, hopefully you're not getting chewed out as much anymore.
I haven't been chewed out in a long time like that, so.
Now, you've been out the military for years now. It's been a while since you've
It
been
has.
out. But you've actually started your own program to actually work with veterans and hook them up with dogs and companions.
Yeah. So, prequel to that is a couple of years ago, we had a dog, Lady Bear, and she was the best dog ever. And she passed away, and we were good friends with the veterinarian, and I mean, our dogs, if you ever come back, you come back as one of our dogs, right? You spend more time at a vet. It's always wellness checks and all these other things. So our vet, when Lady passed, she knew us pretty well, and she said, we got a call a couple of months, probably about 2 months later. I've got this dog down here that you really should come see. And she knew that lady had passed away, and she said, I got this female dog down here that you really need to see. And the dog apparently was, I don't know, either escaped or was let loose, but they found it running on a highway or running next to a highway. She, her teeth were kind of messed up. She looked like she'd been used for fighting because she had scars all over her nose. She had just given birth. Her belly was hanging down on the ground, but no puppies to be found. Her ears had been cropped. It looked like they tried cutting her eyes a little bit. So, they said, you got to come see this dog. And I wasn't ready to see him. But my wife and my daughter, they go down and they meet this dog, and then they come back and they say, oh, you gotta come meet this dog. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm not. So finally they just keep going and packing and packing and packing, and eventually I said, sure, let's go down and let's go just meet this dog. So I go down in there and they throw me in this room, and there's a couch on there, and all of a sudden the door opens up and this big brown mush comes struggling in. And she looks at me and she jumps up on the couch next to me and she puts her head on me and she just starts licking the side of my face. And it was like, we're done, right? That's, okay, this is the girl for me. So we've got Winnie now, and now we're trying to figure out, she has all these scars. She looks like she was used for fighting. What do we do? We went to this dog training school, and there's this young lady there named Rebecca. And Rebecca is our instructor, our trainer, and we're going through. And Rebecca checks out Winnie, and we said, look, this is what we're concerned about, and we want to find out. And so Rebecca checks out Winnie and says, this is the sweetest dog I ever met. And if you want, she probably could be a therapy dog. So I said, all right, fine. I didn't even know what the hell a therapy dog was. It was like, yeah, okay, great. So we go through training, and Winnie, we get closer and closer and better and better. And Winnie, turns out she's a purebred Staffordshire Terrier, and she's just the sweetest girl. And Rebecca, when the course is finished, Rebecca says, hey, I work for a company. I just got hired by a place called Paws of War, and she says, they're always looking for trainers, and I had worked with some of the other folks that were in the class and said, I tried to help them when I could, and I really enjoy dogs and I love animals. And she said, you have a way with dogs and people, have you thought about being a dog trainer? And I was still, I'm still in corporate America. I'm a software engineer, and I work for a company called Cablevision, who ultimately buys Suddenlink, the cable company down here in North Carolina. So I'm getting close to the point where I want to retire. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm looking at every job across the land. All I know is I do not want to wear a suit and tie anymore, and I don't want to deal with meeting after meeting. So I figured dog training, let's see how this goes. And so they started training me to be a dog trainer, and I really enjoyed it. And I did that for a couple of years. And what I would do is things I learned from her by watching her train other dogs and stuff is I would then go to an animal shelter, and I volunteered at a couple of animal shelters, and I would practice on dogs that people were either afraid of or too big to handle. And I practiced on them and taught them how to sit and walk and all of these different commands. And I said, this is kind of cool. So 2019 rolls around, and it's time to retire. I've had enough. The company was taken over by a company called Altice over in Europe, bought the cable company. And originally they had paid me, they took it over in 2016, they paid me to stay. And then 2019, they made me an offer and said, hey, if you want to leave, they made me an offer to leave. And I said, this is great. And then so I started training more frequently. And then eventually Jackie retired about a year later. And, then COVID was out. New York City was shutting down. It was, everybody in the city wanted to get out of the city, so they were looking out on Long Island. And then so we decided the whole neighborhood, our whole clique where we lived, all 5 or 6 families, we all retired around the same time, and we all left Long Island at the same time. Some went to where Wake Forest is. We ended up here in New Bern. Some went to the place in South Carolina, the
Charleston?
No, what's the golfing? Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach. And then there's another looking at just before Hampstead. There's another town down there, kind of a water place. All he wants is a place for his boat. So, so we're looking all along this area. And so when we were getting ready to leave, we talked to the president of Paws and said, hey, look, we're moving down to North Carolina. What do you think about us trying to open a chapter down here? And he said, go for it. And I'm not sure how much faith he had in our ability to do it, but here we are 3 years later. We've got between 70 and 80 dog teams. So we've just had a group of folks that just became service animals, who have service animals, I think 7 people. So in 2.5 years, 7 service dogs of what we've produced, or 9 service dogs we've helped produce. So and that's what we've been doing.
And how do you guys like spread the word about it?
We don't spread it a lot. We go to places like Mumfest and chili cook-offs and those types of things. A lot of it comes from word of mouth from people who are here. We've distributed some business cards. The VA now hands out our business card and gives it to veterans who go to either Moorhead or Jacksonville. People are being referred to us by the VA saying, you know, here's an organization. We don't charge anything for the services. And the cost of a service dog is somewhere around $25,000 to $30,000 per dog. We don't get breed specific. We sit there and work with the dog you have, right? To us, it's all about building a relationship between you and your dog, tightening that relationship, and then being able to teach the dog how to have proper manners, how to walk, how to sit, how to stop when you ask them to stop, those types of things. And then once you've gone through that whole process, and we do AKC validations throughout every step, right? So your dog goes through a canine good citizen test, an advanced good citizen test, ultimately an urban test, right? Which is taking your service dog and going through the neighborhood, going up and down stairs and elevators and escalators and those types of things. And then we teach your dog specific tasks. So I have a veteran, for example, who struggles getting out of chairs, right? So he's got a dog that can do a brace command, and he can hold on to the back of the dog's butt or his shoulder, and the dog helps him get out of the chair. Or the dog can turn, and if he has a rope with him, the dog will pull the rope and help pull him up out of the chair. Some dogs will turn on lights, turn off lights, those types of things. I drop my keys and the dog will pick up your keys, those types of things. So those service dog tasks come later, and it doesn't have to be breed specific, right? They're not all Goldens, they're not all, you know, all Labs, right? They're what people have. They're a lot of Shepherds, a lot of some Dobermans, some are really, we have some Great Danes and we have some Schnauzers, you know, so I mean, we've got the very big and we've got the very small. I've got one dog that we're kind of working with who's deaf, right? So, you know, but the dog has such a relationship with the owner that that's what you want to capitalize on. So that's what we do.
I love it. I love it. Is there anything else you would like to say about your experience in the military or Paws of War?
Yeah, Paws of War, I mean, really, you know, it's easy for me, the Paws side, right? I get to train the animals. Jackie does all the hard work with the administrative stuff. And it's really the students that have to put the work in. I mean, they do the work. All I do is I just kind of show people kind of what to do and stuff. And then they go ahead and they have to work on it and work on it and work on it. So the success that occurs is really due to the person and their dog and them becoming a good team, right? And that's the success to it all. And to see some of their faces when their dog can do something unusual, or, you know, your dog, we're learning in one of the classes now how to stop. So, you know, you see the faces on someone who goes like this to their dog, stop, and their dog stops almost, you know, 2 steps later. And the look on their faces is like, look what my dog did, you know, I mean, and that makes it all worthwhile,
So with Paws of War, how do you get the military dogs back here from overseas?
Yeah, so that's what's unique about Paws, right, which is probably one of the few organizations in the entire country that does that. When Paws was started back in 2014, it was a man named Rob Mizwari and Dory Schofield were 2 people. Dory ran a pet rescue called Save a Pet, which, so if you look at Save a Pet, Help a Vet, Save a Pet, it's really just a play on words. But Dory ran Save a Pet Foundation. And Rob and Dory ended up trying to figure out how they could work on helping veterans. Rob had some experience with some close friends of his that had come back from overseas. They were having really bad times. So Rob tried to introduce getting dogs with them and said, try working with these animals, trying to develop service dogs, but not even to that level of developing a service dog, but just working with dogs. And then what happened is a lot of veterans would come back, they'd get in touch with the organization, and they'd say, I've got a dog over here in Afghanistan, I'd like to bring this dog home. And then so Rob started trying to figure out, well, how do I do that? To bring an animal home is actually an expensive proposition, and sometimes can cost thousands and thousands of dollars to do that. Rob became very good at identifying what needed to be done on the back end, over the dog over in Afghanistan, for example, and then what needs to be done on the front end, which is when the dog arrives in America, what has to happen? So the dogs, 9 times out of 10, they go to JFK. There's a kennel area in JFK. The dogs go into a quarantine. There are doctors, veterinarians who check the dogs out for rabies and diseases. But most of those dogs have received their shots back in Afghanistan. Okay. They figure out how to get some of those shots done back there. And so Rob has become so good at it that Rob can almost tell you exactly how much it will cost to get a dog from Kenya, from the Sudan, from Iraq, Iraq, Afghanistan. And what Rob does is he will sometimes send somebody over there to work with getting the dog, get the shots, get everything set up, and then that person will fly with the dog back to the United States. Sadly, what happens sometimes is that the veteran says, hey, I'm going home in 30 days. I'd like to bring this dog with me. Well, nothing happens in 30 days, right? So what happens is the veteran gets sent back to the States. The dog is still over in Afghanistan. So we send someone over to go help that dog, get it all staged, get the dog put onto a plane, then fly with that dog back to JFK, and then go through that whole quarantine process. And then what we end up doing is we reunite the dog with the veteran. Recently, we had dogs that came from Africa, Afghanistan, and the Philippines. And we had a reunion in Jacksonville, in a convention center down, I think, just outside of Jacksonville. And we had these 3 veteran teams that came to meet their dogs that we had gotten from these various places, brought them back into the States, and then we're able to reunite them. So it's really very cool.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Well, thank you.
So much.